It was a good time. I have lots of memories in there, and most of them were good.
And I just loved living there. I think the Viz community was always just like kind of a special place because there weren't a lot of people living there. But everyone felt really included in everything.
The Viz holds a lot of memories for me. It's a very special building. It's a very special place. It is filled with, a lot of history. All of my memories around the Viz are surrounding students and the wonderful people that have lived there.
It was a cool building. You could tell it was the old architecture by how big the rooms are. I know on the top floor the ceilings were quite tall. It was a cool place.
It was March 16th. I can specifically remember I was sleeping just like any other person would be sleeping at 5 a.m.
So I had fallen asleep on the couch the night before studying for a midterm exam I was supposed to have the next day. And I remember there was a storm that night, and at one point there was like some strikes of lightning and the lights had flashed, but I didn't think much of it at the time.
I was just showing up to work. Normally I get to work about 4:30. This was closer to 5 o'clock, so I was running late that day. When I got here, another employee was outside, and we were talking for a few moments, and during our conversation, I had said to him, "That light looks eerie." And I just remember that because eerie is not a word you get to use a whole lot. And what looked like a light on the roof, like a spotlight with rain washing in front of it, kind of had that glow to it. And it was a few minutes, probably about 2 minutes after when we were talking, my coworker said, "That looks like a fire." He ran inside to call 911. I called on my cell phone while running across the street. And from there, it was a panic trying to get in the building. I've snuck into my fair share of dorms, but I've never broken into one. And even when you're trying to make noise and trying to wake people up, it's harder to get in than people think.
But I just remember getting woken up at about 5 in the morning, I'd say, because there was someone running around banging on windows trying to wake everybody up. And at the time, I didn't really know what was going on because the fire alarms hadn't gone off.
Eventually, I did get in and kind of systematically pulled the fire alarms, waking everyone up.
The fire alarm went off, so immediately I jumped out of bed. I thought it was just another fire alarm.
A bunch of people thought it was a prank or a joke or burnt popcorn or something like that, so they didn't all believe me. So it was kind of trying to convince these people how serious of a situation it was.
All of us woke up, but none of us really thought anything of it. We just thought, oh, someone was making popcorn, or for some reason we were like, oh, that's fine.
In college, you're so used to the fire alarm going off for people burning popcorn or something stupid like that.
I just remember the fire alarm going off, and then it kind of turned off, and so I thought maybe it was a joke, and I decided to go back in my room, but my roommates didn't let me, so
we walked out of our door, and one of our roommates said, oh, did you guys smell smoke? And we just thought, oh, it's nothing. Someone was just cooking. And it didn't really register that anything could be going wrong.
I just remember I opened the door and there's just like a bunch of wind, and I just saw flames everywhere and a bunch of debris falling, and it was the scariest thing I've ever experienced.
Then we got out of the building and realized it was an actual fire. Okay, this is real. Good thing I got out, I guess.
We all just kind of stood there in shock for, it felt like a long time, but it was probably like a couple of seconds.
And luckily one of my roommates went into emergency mode.
Okay, we have to go. We can't go out this way because it was so windy that stuff was just flying off and it was on fire. So I said, okay, we can't go this way. So then we went back into our apartment, and we have a back door that leads into an alleyway. So we ended up going out that way.
And so once we were in the alley, there were people in the houses just kind of watching it, and they realized how scared we were and let us stay in their house for a little bit until we could get a hold of one of the RAs.
Once we knew how serious it was, we made sure we got everyone out, brought them over to our building, and from there the fire department put it out, and Loras then responded.
There was so many people from Loras there already, like Kim Walsh and President Collins and Molly Schumacher, the head of Residence Life. Everybody was over there and everyone was very shaken up, I think, but knowing that everyone was out safe was probably the biggest thing.
Katie Keeler, she's one of the ACs on campus. She arrived, she had her computer with her. We pulled up a roster and immediately checked to make sure everybody who lived in the Viz was there at the time. And if they weren't there, you know, we wanted to account for where they were.
Well, my part was to receive the call shortly after 5 o'clock in the morning and immediately drove to campus and said lots of Hail Marys on the way, and then mostly my role was to make sure that staff and students were receiving the support necessary. The first individual I spoke with was the fire chief. Asked him what he knew of the fire, specifically were all our students and staff safe, and he confirmed indeed that was the case.
Then for the next like 4 or 5 hours, we just kind of stood around and waited, you know, and watched our building burn and them try and put it out. So it was a pretty surreal experience.
I remember too someone asking me if I had any clothes in my office. And I had some sweatpants and some shorts and some workout clothes and things like that, because some of these kids were in their boxers and things like that because they woke up, got rushed out of the building, and that was it.
I remember the plan of making sure students had clothes and toothbrushes and, you know, some of those essential toiletries and things that were needed.
Campus dining came with bagels pretty soon. Res Life came with blankets pretty soon. So it was really nice to be able to just have all these supplies right away. There was a dentist's office down the street that dropped off like toothbrushes and everything within an hour. And so just to see the community outpour so soon, even though it happened at like 5 a.m., was just incredible.
Later in the morning, we went over to Kane and kind of just stayed there, and that was basically like our headquarters all day.
When we were in Kane Hall for our meetings during the day and stuff, Residence Life was figuring out where we would live after that. There was a lot of uncertainty happening too, because we didn't know if our apartment was going to be destroyed or just smoke smell, or if it was flooded. We didn't know if the sprinklers went off.
Obviously, I mean, they put the fire out, but there was a lot of damage to the building, and obviously nobody would be able to move back in there. So they let us know that it would be a day or two before we were actually able to get into the building to, you know, get stuff out.
That night, none of us were able to stay in the Viz, so we had to find temporary housing for everyone, myself included.
So most of us, we all went to Beckman Hall, and that's where I ended up staying the rest of the semester, was in Beckman. I got my own room over there, which was pretty nice, you know.
We moved into the Bins area coordinator apartment for a few days. And then it was spring break, which the timing actually worked out well. So we were able to get off campus, which was nice. Just to sort of take a breather, get away from it all.
I think that's something that I really needed, just to kind of, I just needed to get away from it all. And I don't know what I would have done if we hadn't had spring break there, just because it was hard to be on campus.
Later, we were able to go back in for a few things. Only some students were, but I was able to go back in to get contacts, and some students were able to go back in to grab things that if they were able to grab them. In the North Building, most of the things were so damaged and so ruined that most students couldn't.
I guess that's when it like really registered, because like before then, you know, it was just, I didn't really comprehend how much damage there was going to be like in my room, because I was thinking, well, you know, it's all on the top floor, like it might just be a little bit of water, but like I wasn't thinking, you know, there was like 5 fire trucks there, and you know, they're all pumping 1,000 gallons of water a minute, and it took them a couple hours to put it out. So everything was soaking wet. So that's kind of when, you know, I got a little bit upset, and I was like, oh man, like I'm gonna have to replace a lot of stuff, and like a lot of my clothes had to go get professionally cleaned because they were just so, I mean, soaked in like this nasty soot ash stuff, and everything just reeked. I mean, the smell was like, from like weeks after that, every time I'd smell like a bonfire or something, I'd always just like almost have like a flashback back to the Viz, you know, because the smell was so, you know, strong.
Luckily, our apartment was almost completely fine. We had the smoke smell really bad, and our living room had flooded from all the water coming down through the building. But we were very, very fortunate.
So me and my roommates were able to move back in then after we came back from spring break and just live there for the rest of the semester, which was really nice, and we were very fortunate about that.
After several months of conversation and review through legal, engineering, architectural, and construction experts, what we came to learn was that the monies that we would actually receive from the policy were good, but they weren't large enough to be able to renovate and upgrade the building in the way in which we thought was necessary.
Well, you know, it was an old building, and unfortunately with what it would take to rebuild it and what the assessed value was from the insurance and the review of the building, it would make it financially challenging to actually rebuild it in that regard. And the damage was, you know, so severe that the option was to level it.
I think it was something that you don't get over something like that. It's always kind of in your mind. It's something you always think about.
It's kind of sad. I learned a lot more about the history of it after it was torn down, because that's when people seem to want to talk about it, want to remember it, and things like that.
I've learned a lot. I've learned to be safer and to triple check everything. Even though the Vis fire wasn't caused by someone, it just sort of has reminded me, like, okay, I need to double check that I'm turning off everything, so taking those precautions.
I'd say I've mostly moved on. It's still kind of hard sometimes just thinking about it. Like, I was just glad that all of us got out safely, because it would have been a much different story if the radio station people hadn't pulled the fire alarm and gotten us all out safely. Because stuff can be replaced, but people can't, and so I think that kind of is what helped me move on, is knowing that.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of, you know, miss the Vis, and, you know, every once in a while we'll drive by and we'll be like, oh, you know, rip to the Vis, because that was the first place, like, a lot of me and my buddies, you know, I'm a wrestler here. And so, like, all the wrestlers were in the Visitation, and that was the first residence hall we ever stayed in, you know. So, like, a lot of our college firsts were there. We all, you know, that's where we met each other. That's where, you know, I made a bunch of my closest friends that are, like, my friends now. And, you know, that's where my college career began. So it was sad to see it go, and I'm definitely going to miss the place, but life goes on.